The dust swirled across the barren Arizona landscape like a vengeful spirit as Eliza Kendrick squinted at the horizon, her trembling hand pressed against her swollen belly. The journey had taken everything from her, and now it threatened to take the one thing she had left her unborn child. Beside her, Sarah Mitchell stumbled, her own pregnancy more advanced, her face a mask of exhaustion and fear as they both collapsed to the ground, the merciless sun beating down upon them. Blake Eastwood spotted the two women from half a mile away, their colorful dresses stark against the dusty backdrop of the trail leading to Tombstone. It was 1881, and the Arizona Territory was no place for women traveling alone, especially not in their condition. The 30-year-old cowboy had been tracking a stray from his small herd when he noticed the dust cloud that wasn't natural, too small, too contained. Curiosity turned to concern when he realized it was people, and concern to urgency when he saw them fall. "Hold on, ladies," he muttered, digging his heels into his horse's flanks. The animal responded instantly, galloping toward the fallen women. As he drew closer, he could see that both were clearly with child, their dresses stretched tight across their bellies. Blake dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, rushing to the women's side. "Madam, madam, can you hear me?" he asked, gently turning over the younger one with auburn hair. Eliza's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed. "Water," she rasped, her lips cracked and bleeding. "Water," Sarah echoed weakly, her blonde hair matted against her face. Blake reached for his canteen, supporting Eliza's head as he helped her drink small sips. "Not too fast," he cautioned before moving to help Sarah. "What in God's name are you two doing out here alone, stagecoach?" "Attacked," Sarah managed between sips. "Driver killed. We ran, walked, so long." Blake's jaw tightened. Bandits had been hitting the stagecoaches with increasing frequency, emboldened by the lawlessness that still plagued parts of the territory. "My cabin's about 2 miles from here. Can you ladies ride? I can't leave you out here." Eliza nodded weakly, determination flashing in her green eyes. "We can try." Blake helped them to their feet, noting how they swayed even with his support. "My name's Blake Eastwood," he said, hoping conversation might keep them alert. "I run a small cattle operation nearby." "Eliza Kendrick," the auburn-haired woman replied. "This is Sarah Mitchell. We were headed to Tombstone." "Well, Miss Kendrick, Miss Mitchell, let's get you somewhere safe first. Tombstone can wait." With careful movements, Blake helped Sarah onto his horse first, then assisted Eliza to climb up behind her. He took the reins and began leading them toward his cabin, walking at a pace that wouldn't jostle the exhausted women too much. The journey was slow, the sun merciless. Blake kept looking back, concerned each time he saw Eliza's eyes drift closed or Sarah sway in the saddle. "Keep talking to me, ladies," he urged. "Tell me why you're headed to Tombstone." Eliza's voice was thin but determined. "My husband died in the mines back in Colorado. I'm going to live with my cousin." "And you, Miss Mitchell?" Sarah took longer to respond. "I was a seamstress in St. Louis. The father." She trailed off, pain crossing her face that had nothing to do with physical discomfort. "Let's just say I needed a fresh start. I have an offer to work at a dress shop in Tombstone." Blake nodded, understanding the unspoken story. It wasn't uncommon for women in Sarah's situation to seek new beginnings in frontier towns where questions weren't asked and pasts could be buried. By the time they reached the small but sturdy cabin nestled against a rocky outcropping, both women were barely conscious. Blake's dog, an aging border collie named Rusty, barked a welcome as they approached. "Ladies, we're here," Blake announced, helping Sarah down first, then Eliza. Both women leaned heavily against him as he guided them inside, The cabin was simple but clean. A main room served as kitchen and living area with a small bedroom off to one side. Blake helped the women to his bed, apologizing for the cramped quarters. "Rest here. I'll make some broth and fetch fresh water. You're safe now." As Blake busied himself at the stove, heating water and adding dried meat and vegetables to make a simple broth, he kept glancing toward the bedroom. These women needed a doctor, but the nearest one was in Tombstone, nearly 20 miles away. Neither woman was in any condition to travel that far, and he couldn't leave them alone. He carried 2 bowls of broth to the bedroom, finding both women awake but clearly exhausted. "This will help get your strength back," he said, helping Eliza sit up first. "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood," Eliza said softly, accepting the bowl with trembling hands. "You've saved our lives." Blake shook his head. "Any decent man would have done the same, and please call me Blake." As the women sipped the broth, Blake pulled a chair beside the bed. "I'll ride for the doctor tomorrow, but tonight you should rest. The cabin isn't much, but it's yours as long as you need it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you being so kind to strangers?" Blake looked down, slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "My ma raised me to believe that helping others isn't kindness, it's duty, especially out here where surviving takes all of us working together." Later that evening, after making sure the women were comfortable, Blake made a pallet for himself near the fireplace in the main room. As he lay there, listening to the occasional sounds of discomfort from the bedroom, he wondered what twist of fate had brought these women to his doorstep. He had lived alone since returning from the war, preferring the simplicity of his solitary life with his cattle and his dog. Now, suddenly, his quiet existence had been disrupted by 2 pregnant women with nowhere else to go. Morning brought a change in circumstances. Blake awoke to the sound of Sarah's pained cries. Rushing to the bedroom, he found Eliza attempting to comfort the blonde woman who was clutching her belly. "The baby's coming," Eliza explained, her face pale. "Too early. She needs help." Blake felt panic rise in his chest. "I'll ride for the doctor." Eliza shook her head. "There's no time. I worked with a midwife for a year in Denver. I can help her, but I need supplies." Blake followed Eliza's instructions, boiling water and tearing clean shirts into strips for bandages. He gathered the few herbs he had, letting Eliza select what she needed. "You should wait outside," Eliza suggested as Sarah's cries grew more frequent. "Are you sure you can manage?" Blake asked, concerned by how pale Eliza looked herself. "I have to," Eliza replied simply. "Please, bring more water and then give us privacy." The next few hours were the longest of Blake's life. He paced outside the cabin, occasionally bringing fresh water or clean cloths as requested, but otherwise kept his distance. The sounds from inside Sarah's screams, Eliza's soothing words tore at him. Finally, when the sun was high in the sky, he heard a different sound, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn. When Eliza finally opened the door, her face was drawn with exhaustion but smiling. "She has a son," she announced. "Small, but he seems strong." Blake exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "And Miss Mitchell, weak, but she'll recover with rest. We still need a doctor, though. Both of them need proper care." "I'll leave at first light tomorrow," Blake promised. "It's too late to start the journey now." That evening, Blake kept a respectful distance as Eliza tended to Sarah and the newborn. He prepared a simple stew, bringing a bowl to Eliza, who insisted on eating by Sarah's bedside. "You're exhausted," he observed as Eliza suppressed a yawn. "You should rest." "I will," she assured him. "Once I'm certain they're stable." Blake studied her face, noting the determination in her green eyes despite the fatigue etched into every line of her face. "You're quite remarkable, Miss Kendrick." A faint blush colored Eliza's cheeks. I did what anyone would do. No, Blake said softly. Not everyone would have the courage or skill you showed today. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Then Eliza looked away, her hand moving protectively to her own rounded belly. Your child will be fortunate to have such a strong mother, Blake said. Eliza's smile was tinged with sadness. I hope so. I'm all this little one will have. True to his word, Blake departed at dawn, promising to return with a doctor as quickly as possible. The ride to Tombstone was hard and fast, his mind constantly returning to the women in his cabin. He had never been one for town life, preferring the solitude of his small ranch, but now he urged his horse faster, desperate to reach civilization and help. Tombstone in 1881 was a bustling silver mining town, its streets filled with miners, gamblers, and businessmen all seeking their fortune. Blake made straight for the doctor's office, relieved to find Dr. Howard Jenkins in. 2 pregnant women, the doctor repeated after hearing Blake's story. And one's already delivered. Well, I'd better come right away. Let me gather my supplies. The return journey took longer, the doctor's wagon unable to match the speed of Blake's horse alone. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Blake's heart clenched when he entered the cabin and found Eliza lying beside Sarah, both women pale and still. The baby lay swaddled between them, whimpering softly. Eliza, Blake called, fear gripping him. Her eyes fluttered open, relief washing over her face. You came back. Of course I did, he replied, stepping aside to let the doctor enter. I brought help. Dr. Jenkins moved quickly, examining Sarah and her baby first, then turning his attention to Eliza. His expression was grave as he listened to her heart and felt her pulse. Both women are suffering from exhaustion and dehydration, he announced. The new mother has a slight fever that needs watching. The baby is underweight but otherwise healthy. He turned to Blake. They can't be moved, not for several days at least. Miss Kendrick's condition is particularly concerning. She could deliver early if she doesn't get complete rest. Blake nodded. They can stay as long as needed. After giving Blake detailed instructions and leaving medicines, the doctor prepared to depart. I'll return in 3 days unless you fetch me sooner. Keep them hydrated and resting. Miss Mitchell should be able to nurse her baby, which will help them both. That night, Blake moved a small cot into the main room for himself, giving the women continued privacy in the bedroom. He checked on them frequently, bringing water and the medicinal teas the doctor had prescribed. During one such visit, he found Eliza awake while Sarah and her baby slept. You should be resting, he admonished gently. I was thinking about how strange life is, Eliza replied softly. 2 days ago, I thought Sarah and I would die on that dusty trail. Now we're safe and she has a beautiful son. Blake sat on the edge of the bed. What will you do when you're well enough to travel? Eliza sighed. Continue to Tombstone, I suppose. My cousin Martha owns a boarding house there. She's offered me a place to stay until the baby comes and work afterward. And Miss Mitchell, she has no one, Eliza admitted. The dress shop was only going to hold her position until the end of the month. That's past now. Blake frowned. She can't manage alone with a newborn. No, Eliza agreed. I've told her she can come with me to Martha's. It will be tight, but we'll manage. Blake was silent for a moment, contemplating the women's situation. There's another option, he said finally. You could both stay here at least until you're stronger and have a better plan. Eliza's eyes widened. We couldn't impose, it's not an imposition, Blake interrupted. I have the space and frankly I could use the help. This place could benefit from a woman's touch and I'm away with the cattle often enough. Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Eastwood? Eliza asked, a hint of amusement in her tired voice. Blake smiled. I suppose I am, Miss Kendrick. Room and board in exchange for keeping house once you're well enough, at least until you both decide what's next. Eliza studied his face, searching for any sign of ulterior motives. Finding none, she nodded slowly. I'll discuss it with Sarah when she's stronger. It's a generous offer. It's practical, Blake corrected. For all of us. The next few days established a routine. Blake tended to his cattle in the mornings, returning to check on the women throughout the day. Sarah grew stronger, her fever breaking, and spent hours gazing at her son, whom she named Thomas after her father. Eliza's recovery was slower. Though the doctor had been encouraged by her progress during his return visit, he warned that her condition remained delicate. Complete rest for at least another week, he instructed. Her body is fighting to maintain the pregnancy. As promised, Blake kept his distance, respecting the women's privacy and need for rest. Yet he found himself looking forward to the brief conversations with Eliza when he brought meals or fresh water. She had a quick mind and dry wit that surprised him, especially when she teased him about his bachelor ways. No wonder your shirts have more patches than original fabric, she remarked one evening, examining his mending efforts. Didn't anyone teach you to sew properly? I manage, Blake defended, though he smiled at her criticism. Barely, Eliza retorted. When I'm up and about, I'll show you how it's done properly. Such moments of lightness were balanced by more serious conversations. Blake learned that Eliza had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a schoolteacher. She had married young to James Kendrick, following him west when he sought his fortune in the Colorado silver mines. He was a good man, Eliza said softly one evening. Not perfect, but kind. When the mine collapsed, I had nothing left but memories and this child growing inside me. Blake shared his own story in return: his youth in Missouri, his time fighting in the war, and his decision to start fresh in Arizona territory. I was tired of fighting, he explained. Out here it's just me, the cattle, and the land. Simple. Until 2 pregnant women collapsed at your doorstep, Eliza added with a small smile. Until then, Blake agreed, returning her smile. By the time Sarah was strong enough to move about the cabin, helping with simple tasks and caring for little Thomas, Blake had expanded the lean-to behind the cabin into a proper second room. It was small but gave the women more space and privacy. You didn't have to do that, Eliza protested when he showed them the addition. I've been meaning to expand anyway, Blake lied. In truth, he'd realized that if the women accepted his offer to stay, they would need more space than his small cabin provided. Sarah was the first to agree to Blake's proposition. I have nowhere else to go, she admitted frankly. And Thomas needs stability. If you're sure we won't be a burden, I'd be grateful to stay and help however I can. Eliza took longer to decide. My cousin is expecting me, she explained to Blake as they sat on the porch one evening watching the sunset. Sarah was inside, putting Thomas down for the night. I understand, Blake said, though he was surprised by the disappointment he felt. Tombstone would offer more opportunities for you and your child. Eliza was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on her belly. Martha's boarding house is always full. I'd be sharing a room with my cousin, working long hours cleaning and cooking. It would be a hard life for a baby. And this wouldn't be. Blake gestured to the modest cabin and the rugged landscape beyond. It would be different, Eliza conceded. But there's something peaceful here, something honest about the life you've built. Blake studied her profile in the fading light. Are you saying you'll stay? Eliza turned to face him, her expression serious. If we're to stay, both of us with children, we should be clear about expectations. This would be a practical arrangement, nothing more. Of course, Blake agreed quickly. ignoring the strange tug in his chest. Purely practical. Yet as the days passed and Eliza's strength returned, Blake found himself wondering if anything involving Eliza Kendrick could ever be purely practical. He watched her hanging laundry in the yard, her auburn hair gleaming in the sunlight, her movements graceful despite her advancing pregnancy. He observed her patience with Sarah's occasional tears, her gentle humor when Blake burned dinner, her obvious intelligence when they discussed books during the long evenings. For her part, Eliza found herself increasingly comfortable in Blake's presence. He was unlike any man she had known, quiet but not withdrawn, strong but never imposing, capable but willing to admit when he needed help. She appreciated how he treated Sarah with the same respect he showed Eliza, never judging the younger woman for her circumstances. 1 month after the women's arrival, the cabin had transformed. Curtains fashioned from flour sacks hung at the windows, wildflowers brightened the table, and the smell of fresh bread replaced the bachelor mustiness. Blake's mended shirts now looked presentable, and even his dog Rusty seemed happier with the increased attention. "You've worked wonders," Blake commented one evening as they finished a proper meal at the table he had expanded to accommodate all of them. "Small improvements," Eliza demurred. "It's the least we can do for your hospitality." "It's more than that," Blake insisted. "You've made this place a home." Their eyes met across the table, and Eliza felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. She looked away quickly, reminding herself of their arrangement. Blake was their benefactor, nothing more. Any feelings beyond gratitude were inappropriate, especially given her condition. Sarah noticed the exchange, her perceptive eyes missing little these days. Later, as she and Eliza prepared for bed in their shared room, she broached the subject. "He cares for you, you know." Eliza busied herself with folding laundry. "He's a kind man. He cares for both of us." Sarah shook her head, smiling as she nursed Thomas. "It's different with you. I see how he watches when he thinks no one is looking." "Then he's forgotten I'm carrying another man's child," Eliza replied sharply, immediately regretting her tone. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean—" "You don't have to apologize," Sarah interrupted gently. "But don't dismiss the possibility of happiness because you think you don't deserve it. James would want you to live, Eliza, to love again." Eliza sat heavily on her bed, her hand resting on her 7-month belly. "It's not that simple." "It never is," Sarah agreed. "But sometimes life gives us second chances when we least expect them." The conversation left Eliza restless. After Sarah and Thomas were asleep, she slipped outside, needing fresh air and space to think. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky like diamond dust. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Blake approach until he spoke. "Couldn't sleep." Eliza startled slightly. "The baby is active tonight," she said, which was true enough. "And my mind won't quiet." Blake leaned against the porch railing beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Anything you want to talk about?" Eliza hesitated. "I'm confused, Blake." "About what happens next, for all of us." "What do you mean?" "This arrangement we have, it was meant to be temporary, but as the days pass, I find myself—" She trailed off, unsure how to express the complex emotions swirling within her, having second thoughts about staying. Blake asked, his voice carefully neutral. "No," Eliza replied quickly. "The opposite, actually. I'm finding it hard to imagine leaving." Blake was silent for a long moment. "Then don't." "It's not that simple," Eliza echoed her earlier words to Sarah. "I have responsibilities." "This child could have a good life here," Blake finished. "With you, with all of us." Eliza turned to face him. "What exactly are you saying, Blake?" He took a deep breath. "I'm saying that this cabin has never felt like a home until you and Sarah arrived." I'm saying that I look forward to coming back from the fields because I know you'll be here. I'm saying that I care about you, Eliza, more than I expected to, more than might be wise. Because of the baby, Eliza stated flatly. No, Blake said firmly. The baby is part of you and I care about you, all of you. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. We barely know each other. We know what matters, Blake countered. I know you're strong and brave and kind. I know you face challenges head on. I know you're loyal to those you care about. He paused. What do you know about me? Despite herself, Eliza smiled. That you're stubborn and private, that you're generous without expecting recognition, that you respect women enough to see them as equals, not burdens. Blake reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. That sounds like a foundation to me. Before Eliza could respond, a cry came from inside the cabin. Thomas, waking for his nighttime feeding. The moment broken, Eliza squeezed Blake's hand once before withdrawing her own. I should help Sarah. Blake nodded, understanding. We can continue this conversation another time, when you're ready. Eliza hesitated at the door. Thank you for your honesty, Blake. It's given me much to think about. Inside, Sarah was already nursing Thomas, her face knowing as Eliza entered. Everything all right? Yes, Eliza replied, though her racing heart suggested otherwise. Just needed some air, Sarah smiled. And some conversation, apparently. Eliza gave her friend a warning look. It was nothing. If you say so, Sarah replied, clearly unconvinced. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Eliza was hanging laundry while Blake mended a fence nearby, both of them carefully polite after the previous night's conversation. Sarah was inside with Thomas when the sound of an approaching wagon made them all pause. Blake shaded his eyes, peering down the dusty track. We're not expecting anyone, are we? Eliza shook her head, suddenly apprehensive. They had few visitors this far from town. The wagon came into view, driven by a middle-aged woman with a severe expression. Beside her sat a younger woman who bore a striking resemblance to Eliza. Martha, Eliza breathed, recognizing her cousin. Blake straightened, brushing dust from his clothes. Your cousin from Tombstone. Eliza nodded, her stomach clenching with anxiety. She had written to Martha weeks ago, explaining her delay and her temporary arrangement at Blake's cabin. She hadn't expected her cousin to come looking for her. Martha Kendrick Wilkins was a formidable woman of 45, widowed young and hardened by years of running her boarding house in Tombstone's rough and tumble environment. She wasted no time on pleasantries as she climbed down from the wagon. Elizabeth, she said, using Eliza's full name, I've been worried sick. Your letter was vague about your situation here. I'm fine, Martha, Eliza assured her, accepting a brief embrace. This is Blake Eastwood, whose hospitality has been a godsend. Martha assessed Blake with sharp eyes. Mr. Eastwood. Blake nodded politely. Madam, please, come inside out of the sun. The next hour was tense. Martha questioned Eliza thoroughly about her health, the baby, and the propriety of her living arrangement. Sarah's presence seemed to particularly disturb her. An unwed mother living under the same roof as you, Martha hissed when she and Eliza stepped outside briefly. What will people think, Elizabeth? I don't particularly care what people think, Eliza replied, her patience wearing thin. Sarah is my friend and she needed help, as did I. Martha sighed, her expression softening slightly. I understand your charitable impulse, but you must think of your reputation and your child's future. I am thinking of my child's future, Eliza insisted. Here we have fresh air, good food, and people who care about us. One man and a fallen woman, Martha asked skeptically. That's hardly a proper family environment, Eliza bristled. Sarah is not fallen. She's a woman who made choices based on false promises, And Blake is the most honorable man I've ever met." Martha studied her cousin's flushed face. "You care for him," she stated rather than asked. Eliza didn't deny it. "I do, though it's complicated." "Everything worthwhile is," Martha replied unexpectedly. "James has been gone nearly a year now. You're allowed to move forward, Elizabeth." "That's not what I expected you to say," Eliza admitted. Martha's stern facade cracked slightly. "I want you to be happy and secure. I thought that meant coming to live with me. But perhaps—" She glanced toward the cabin, where Blake could be seen through the window, awkwardly entertaining Martha's companion. "Perhaps there are other paths to security." When they returned inside, Martha announced her intention to stay the night before returning to Tombstone the following day. "I've imposed on Mr. Eastwood's hospitality enough for one day," she explained, "but the journey is too long to make again immediately." That evening, with the addition of Martha and her companion, a young widow who helped at the boarding house, the cabin felt crowded but surprisingly convivial. Martha, having apparently decided to reserve judgment, engaged Blake in conversation about his cattle operation and plans for expansion. "You seem to have a solid understanding of the business," she commented, impressed despite herself by his thoughtful answers. "I try to plan ahead," Blake replied modestly, "though I'll admit my focus has shifted somewhat in recent months." His eyes drifted to Eliza as he spoke, the meaning clear to everyone present. Martha raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Later, after Martha and her companion had been settled in the main room, Blake insisting on sleeping in the barn to give the women privacy, Eliza found herself unable to sleep. Martha's arrival had forced her to confront the reality of her situation, the growing feelings for Blake, her responsibility to her unborn child, the practical considerations of her future. She slipped outside once more, drawn to the peace of the night. As if summoned by her thoughts, Blake emerged from the barn, pausing when he saw her. "I seem to be making a habit of this," Eliza said softly. "I don't mind," Blake replied, joining her on the porch. "Your cousin is an interesting woman." Eliza laughed quietly. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it. She means well." "She cares about you," Blake observed. "As do I." Eliza took a deep breath. "Blake, about what you said last night, you don't have to respond yet," he interrupted gently. "I understand this is complicated." "Please let me finish," Eliza insisted. "I've been thinking about nothing else since our conversation, about what I want, what would be best for my child, what future I see for myself." Blake waited, his expression guarded but hopeful. "I care for you too," Eliza continued. "More than I thought possible after James. But I'm afraid of depending on someone again, afraid of building a life that could collapse as quickly as the last one did." "I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen," Blake said honestly, "but I can promise that you wouldn't face it alone." "Neither would your child." Eliza stepped closer to him. "If we were to explore these feelings, we would need to take things slowly. My baby will come first always." "I would expect nothing less," Blake assured her. "And Sarah and Thomas, they need stability too." "They're part of our unusual family now," Blake said simply. "The cabin is their home for as long as they want it to be." Eliza felt tears threatening again, hormones, she told herself, though she knew it was more than that. "You're a good man, Blake Eastwood." Blake reached out, tentatively brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you, Eliza Kendrick, are an extraordinary woman." The moment hung between them, fragile and precious. Then, with the barest hesitation, Eliza leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning, over almost before it began. But it sealed something between them, a promise, a beginning. When they parted, Blake's smile was brighter than the stars overhead. "We should get some rest," he said reluctantly. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, I suspect. With Martha here, undoubtedly, Eliza agreed with a small laugh. Morning arrived with surprising harmony. Martha, having observed the household dynamics and Blake's obvious care for both women, seemed to have softened her position overnight. "I came here intending to bring you back to Tombstone," she told Eliza as they prepared breakfast together. "But I can see you found something valuable here, something worth nurturing." Eliza glanced through the window to where Blake was showing Sarah how to feed the chickens, Thomas bundled against her chest. "Yes," she agreed softly. "I believe I have." Martha's departure later that morning was marked by unexpected warmth. She embraced Eliza tightly, whispering, "Your parents would be proud of the woman you've become." "As am I." To Blake, she offered a firm handshake and a direct gaze. "Take care of my cousin, Mr. Eastwood. She deserves nothing but happiness." "That's my intention, Mrs. Wilkins," Blake replied solemnly. As the wagon disappeared down the track, Blake stood beside Eliza, his hand finding hers. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "About staying?" Eliza squeezed his hand. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time." The weeks that followed were a time of adjustment and growing closeness. Blake and Eliza moved carefully, building their relationship on small moments, shared laughter over domestic mishaps, quiet conversations after Sarah and Thomas were asleep, occasional touches that lingered longer each time. Sarah watched their blossoming relationship with approval, often finding excuses to give them time alone together. "I'm taking Thomas for a walk," she would announce, "or we'll have a nap in our room for a while." Blake expanded the cabin further, adding a proper bedroom for Sarah and Thomas and enlarging the main living area. "For when the family grows," he explained, his eyes meeting Eliza's with meaning. As Eliza's pregnancy advanced, Blake's protectiveness increased. He insisted on handling the heavier chores, brought special treats from town, and spent evenings reading to her when her back ached too badly to move comfortably. "You don't have to treat me like I'm made of glass," Eliza protested one evening as he insisted on rubbing her swollen feet. "I know," Blake replied, his strong hands working gently. "But I want to. Let me care for you, Eliza. You've spent so long being strong for everyone else." It was during one such quiet evening, with Sarah already asleep and the cabin peaceful, that Blake finally voiced what had been on his mind for weeks. "I want to marry you, Eliza," he said without preamble. "Not because of the baby or because it's proper, but because I love you. I think I've loved you since I found you in the dust that day, though I didn't recognize it then." Eliza's breath caught. They had spoken of feelings of caring, but neither had used that word before. "Blake, you don't have to answer now," he continued. "I know it's fast. I know you might not be ready, but I wanted you to know where I stand." Eliza reached for his hand. "I love you too," she said simply. "I think I have for some time now." Blake's face transformed with joy. "Then you'll marry me?" "Yes," Eliza replied, laughing softly at his eagerness. "Though perhaps after the baby comes. I'd prefer not to waddle down the aisle." Blake kissed her then, a proper kiss full of promise and longing. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow or next year, it doesn't matter, as long as we're together." The baby, however, had other plans. 2 weeks later, Eliza woke in the night with sharp pains across her belly. "Blake," she gasped, reaching for him in the darkness. He was instantly alert. "Is it time?" "I think so," she managed between contractions. "Too fast. It shouldn't be this fast for a first baby." Blake lit the lamp, his face composed despite his inner panic. "I'll wake Sarah. She'll know what to do." Sarah took charge with calm efficiency, directing Blake to boil water and fetch clean linens. "The baby is coming quickly," she confirmed after examining Eliza, "but everything seems normal." "Your body knows what to do, Eliza." The labor was intense but mercifully brief. As dawn broke over the Arizona landscape, Eliza delivered a healthy baby girl, her cries strong and indignant. "She's perfect," Blake whispered, awe in his voice as Sarah placed the swaddled infant in Eliza's arms. "Just like her mother." Eliza looked up at him, exhausted but radiant. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" Blake blinked, emotion overwhelming him. "My daughter?" "If you still want to marry me," Eliza teased weakly, "then yes, your daughter, in all the ways that matter." Blake took the tiny bundle with reverent hands. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm your pa." Sarah slipped from the room, giving the new family privacy. In the quiet aftermath, as Eliza rested and Blake cradled the newborn, they discussed names. "I was thinking Grace," Eliza suggested. "After my mother." "Grace Eastwood," Blake tested the name. "It's beautiful," Eliza's eyes widened. "Eastwood. But we're not married yet." Blake smiled tenderly. "We will be. As soon as you're strong enough to stand before the preacher, if you're willing. I've already spoken to him in town." 2 weeks later, on a clear autumn morning, Blake and Eliza were married in the yard of their cabin, with Sarah as witness and the babies as reluctant guests of honor. The ceremony was simple, the celebration modest, but the joy was boundless. "I never expected this," Eliza confessed that night as they stood on the porch, looking at the stars. "When James died, I thought my chance at happiness had died with him." "Life has a way of surprising us," Blake replied, his arm around her waist. "When I found you and Sarah that day, I was just doing what anyone would do. I never imagined you would change my life so completely." Inside, Sarah was settling the babies for the night. She had blossomed in recent months, finding purpose in helping with the household and caring for the children. The dress shop in Tombstone had long since filled her position, but she had discovered a talent for sewing that brought in additional income as word spread about her skills. "We should ask Sarah if she wants us to build her a separate cabin," Blake suggested. "Give her more independence as Thomas grows." Eliza nodded thoughtfully. "We should, though I suspect she'll say no. She values being part of this family as much as we value having her." True to Eliza's prediction, when they broached the subject with Sarah the next day, she shook her head firmly. "This is our home, all of us together, unless you're trying to get rid of me," she added with a teasing smile. "Never," Blake assured her. "You and Thomas belong here as much as any of us." As the seasons changed, their unusual family settled into a rhythm. Blake expanded his cattle operation. Hiring 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, he built at a respectful distance from the main cabin. Eliza recovered her strength and took to ranch life with surprising enthusiasm, particularly enjoying the vegetable garden she established. Sarah's sewing business flourished, with women from Tombstone and surrounding areas commissioning dresses and linens. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler, doted on by all 3 adults and especially fascinated by Baby Gracie, as he called her. The cabin expanded again, with Blake and the ranch hands adding 2 more rooms to accommodate their growing needs. "At this rate, we'll have a proper house before Grace starts school," Eliza remarked as she watched the construction. "That's the plan," Blake replied with a wink. "Especially if we keep adding to the family." Eliza blushed, though she couldn't deny the idea appealed to her. Grace was nearly a year old now, a cheerful baby with her mother's auburn hair and her father's for Blake, was her father in every way that mattered steady temperament. Life wasn't without challenges. The harsh Arizona climate tested them with drought one season and flooding the next. Blake was injured when a spooked horse threw him, requiring weeks of recovery during which Eliza and the ranch hands managed the cattle. A measles outbreak in Tombstone kept them isolated for a month, anxiously monitoring the children for symptoms. Yet through each challenge, they found strength in each other. The bond between Blake and Eliza deepened, their partnership becoming the foundation upon which their family thrived. Sarah found confidence and purpose, shedding the shame of her past and embracing her role as Thomas's mother and valued member of their household. 2 years after Grace's birth, Eliza gave birth to a son they named William, after Blake's father. 6 months later, Sarah surprised them by announcing her engagement to Jacob Turner, the more senior of Blake's ranch hands. "Are you sure?" Eliza asked privately, knowing how cautious Sarah had been about trusting men again. Sarah nodded, her eyes clear and certain. "He's kind to Thomas, patient with me, and—" She smiled softly. "He makes me laugh, Eliza. After everything, he makes me laugh." The wedding took place the following spring, with Thomas proudly serving as ring bearer and Grace toddling down the aisle scattering wildflower petals. Sarah and Jacob built a small house on Blake's property, close enough for daily visits but far enough for privacy. Life settled into a new pattern. The two families shared meals often, celebrated holidays together, and supported each other through life's inevitable challenges. When Sarah announced she was expecting another child, Eliza was the first to embrace her, tears of joy in both women's eyes. "Did you ever imagine, that day in the dust, that this would be our life?" Sarah asked as they sat watching the children play in the yard, their husbands repairing a fence together in the distance. Eliza shook her head. "Never. I thought we were at the end, not the beginning." Sarah smiled, placing her hand over Eliza's. "I'm glad we collapsed where we did." "So am I," Eliza agreed, her eyes finding Blake's as he looked up and waved. "So very glad." 5 years to the day after Blake found them, the expanded family gathered for a special dinner. The table now stretched the length of the main room, accommodating Blake and Eliza with their 3 children, Grace, William, and 2-year-old Margaret. Sarah and Jacob with Thomas and their daughter Emma, plus Martha, who visited regularly from Tombstone, and the ranch hands who had become extended family. As Blake stood to offer a toast, Eliza was struck by how far they had come from that desperate day in the dust. What had seemed like the end of hope had instead been the beginning of something beautiful, a family created not by blood but by choice, by love, by the simple human instinct to help others in need. "To family," Blake said, raising his glass, "however it finds us." "To family," they echoed, and Eliza's eyes met Blake's across the table, the love between them as strong and certain as the Arizona landscape that had brought them together. Later, as they stood on the porch of what had indeed become a proper house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Blake pulled Eliza close against the evening chill. "Happy?" he asked softly, his lips against her hair. Eliza turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face, older now, lined by sun and weather and laughter, but still the face of the man who had saved her in more ways than one. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied. "Thank you for stopping that day. For seeing 2 women in the dust and choosing to help." "Best decision I ever made," Blake said simply, bending to kiss her as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. And in that moment, surrounded by the family they had built together, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that sometimes life's hardest journeys led to the most beautiful destinations. What had seemed like an ending, 2 pregnant women collapsed in the dust, had instead been the beginning of a love story neither of them could have imagined, but both would cherish for the rest of their days.